My name is Fatma, and you're listening to The Paper Cut, a podcast about books and reading from the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia. This episode is the second in my Not a Problem series, where we'll be discussing the novel Telepathy by Dr Amir Tag Elsir, and translated into English by William Hutchins. Amir Tag Elsir is a Sudanese novelist. He's published over a dozen works, including The Grub Hunter, which was published in 2010 and shortlisted for the International Prize for Arabic Fiction in 2011. And his novel 366, published in 2013, was longlisted for the same prize in 2014. 366 was also among the winners of the 2015 Qatar Prize for the Arabic Novel. When Dr. Amir Tag Elsir is not writing novels that are going on to win huge international prizes, he spends his spare time practicing medicine in Doha. I've really enjoyed learning about Dr. Amir Tag Elsir's life and his work, and if you're interested in learning more, I'm going to be sharing a very interesting interview that he did with Arab Lit. I'll link it in the transcript to this episode, which you can find on my website. He talks all about his own writing process, as well as the process of getting published in the Arab world. Hint, it's very hard. The book of the day, however, is Telepathy. Published in 2015 by the short-lived Bloomsbury Qatar Foundation publishing imprint, it follows the life of an unnamed, successful Sudanese author from the day of the launch of his latest novel, Hunger's Hopes. His novel centers around Nishan Hamza Nishan, an aspiring lawyer who becomes afflicted with seasonal schizophrenia. At the launch, the narrator crosses paths with a man who claims to be none other than Nishan Hamza Nishan, a man with the exact same name and life story as the author's protagonist in Hunger's Hopes. I don't know how to wrap up this summary without giving away too much information about the plot that would ruin it, so let me borrow from the blurb of my edition, which says, Tag Elsir takes his readers on a chilling journey through the unsettled mind of an author who loses control over his sense of reality. It's a slim story, under 170 pages, but I always find that those are the ones that always seem to slow me down and force me to take the story in, one sentence or sometimes even one word at a time. Truthfully, the first time I read it, I put it down, close to 70 pages, and I wasn't really sure if I was going to continue. Now, although I usually advise people to abandon books if they cannot get past the first 50 pages easily, I think this is one of those few books where I'd recommend you read all the way through to the end, because you simply will not be able to make a full judgment of it until you get to the absolute end. Literally, the last line changed the whole story. A review on Qantara's culture blog states, the novel takes up the line of inquiry: to what extent are authors accountable for their body of work after it's published? Are they responsible for its social impact? I reached out to Dr. Tag Elsir for comments to get to the bottom of this and other questions, and he graciously responded. I'm going to be publishing the full translation of those responses, as well as his original response in Arabic. So for bonus points, you can check that out on my website. It'll be up in the next couple of days. I'm still working on the translation, and God bless translators everywhere, because they do the impossible. Dr. Tag Elsir said that, to an extent, the book did very much explore the author's relationship with his works. Tag Elsir's relationships with some of his characters extend far beyond the bounds of just one novel on occasion. He often has characters follow him around from one manuscript to another, reappearing in different guises. As a reader, I personally love it when writers leave Easter eggs like that in their books, because it feels like a little gift to loyal readers in some curious way. But in Telepathy, Tag Elsir also wanted to explore the minds of characters who have experienced great suffering, such as the character of Linda, who suffers from a chronic degenerative illness, which I won't reveal here because I'm still trying to be mindful of not spoiling too much, and it is like walking on eggshells. Personally, I noticed that the story was filled with characters grappling with a duality or a fragmenting of their senses of identity. At the very start of a story, the narrator goes on holiday to Kuala Lumpur and meets characters who are somehow not who they say they are, or who appear to be struggling with which identity to cling to. There's the American leftist who ends up in Japan, adopts a Japanese name and the entire Japanese culture for himself. Back home in Sudan, there's Nejma, the young self-proclaimed fan of the narrator, who in the beginning dresses only in traditional clothing and very modestly, and who throughout the story gets more and more quote-unquote modern until she appears near the end with blonde hair, pencil-thin eyebrows, and her veil barely clinging on. Of course, there's also Nishan Hamza Nishan, who deals with the ultimate fragmentation of identity, an affliction, which I believe is fictional, called seasonal schizophrenia. It's sort of a compounded issue for him because even that fragmentation of his identity is not permanent. His identity as a person with schizophrenia is not even fixed. I felt as though Dr. Amir Tag Elsir relied heavily on finding an avatar for each character. So I asked him if he felt as though the unnamed narrator was an avatar of himself, as sort of the ultimate avatar in the story. And unsurprisingly, the answer was yes. There's a big part of himself in the character of the narrator, and he often identifies himself, or should I say, incorporates a lot of aspects of his identity, or uses his narrator as a vessel for exploring aspects of his identity in different novels. And he's done this throughout all of his novels, often drawing from his own personal experience, but also from characters he's met around him and from real life events that have happened in Sudan mainly. Looking back, I see that there were actually a huge amount of characters that have shown up and made an appearance in the story, like a huge amount in relation to the size of the novel. But I think that Tag Elsir's skill in constructing the plot and keeping the pace moving at a certain speed allows us not to feel totally crowded and overwhelmed. Nevertheless, there was a certain low-grade uneasiness that permeates every page. The characters seem a little bit off in everything that they do, and in my mind it felt like they were putting on their personalities and performing with them as though they were costumes. And on the other hand, sometimes I would get the distinct sense that the writing was a little bit too awkward and stiff. And although I haven't read the Arabic, I wondered if this may be some sort of lost in translation situation. Now, I did know that the original Arabic title was Taqs, which translates to weather or ritual, depending on the context. And obviously that does not correlate with the translation telepathy. So I needed to get to the bottom of this. And I asked Amir Tag Elsir about this. And he kindly explained a very fascinating insight into the process of getting this book published, getting it edited and published. He explained that in the original manuscript of the book, the ending, which I'm still trying desperately not to reveal, was in fact a premeditated event or a ritual or rite. However, in discussions with his editors at Bloomsbury, it was felt as though this premeditation would be too limiting to the rest of the text. And so a decision was made to edit that out of the novel and change the name in English to Telepathy. As such, the title in Arabic, which could be ritual or rite, R-I-T-E, was no longer as poignant anymore. In fact, Tag Elsir now considers the English title to be more appropriate to how the novel ended up in its final form. Please tell me I'm not the only one who finds this kind of information super fascinating. Seriously, anyone. Other than these suspected translation issues, the only other potential critique I might have of this book is the jarring ending. I really won't say anything, but I will say once again that everything changed in the last line of the novel. Obviously, that's a huge testament to Tag Elsir's skill as a writer to be able to lead us up to that point without ever letting on where we would be ending up. But at the same time, I wonder if it was maybe a little bit too abrupt, and if maybe just even one more paragraph or a few pages would have rounded up the story even better. Now, if I sound way too vague to make sense, it's because I'm trying so hard not to ruin anything for anyone who plans to read this book after my review. I really hope you do, because I really need someone to talk about it, and I don't know anyone personally who's read the book yet. In the absence of a living human being to talk to about it, I did scroll through Goodreads for some reviews and came upon a very insightful one by a user called Antonomasia, who says about Telepathy, it shows a side to a country that the average casual follower of Western news rarely contemplates. Logically, I would have supposed there were some middle-class people in Sudan, but had never heard anything about them and couldn't imagine what their lives might be like, which will sound crass to anyone who has real connections with the place. While most news coverage about the global south is bad news, Sudan is, more than most, one of those countries of which the impression is that almost everyone is a perpetually suffering victim, apart from a handful of corrupt bigwigs at the top. The reviewer goes on to say, I didn't think of it as a place where these sorts of things might happen. A middle-class man goes on holiday to Malaysia. There is a fad for reflexology. A cleaner's son nags his mom to get him a Galaxy Note she can't afford. I mean, this is exactly why I wanted to start this Not a Problem series. The reviewer was so articulate in explaining why I want to share books from these regions specifically. Previously, all they thought of when Sudan came up was, in their own words, perpetually suffering victims apart from a handful of corrupt bigwigs at the top. And thanks to this book, their views have been duly expanded. Maybe just a little bit, but I still think it's an important start. And it's kind of interesting for me to hear from non-Arabs about what they think of when they think of Sudan. Maybe because I come from Oman, which is has a very large and active Sudanese community, and some of my family have lived in Sudan, and I personally have been trained and taught by Sudanese lawyers. So I feel like I have a much greater exposure to Sudanese culture than, I guess, others. More than some, less than others, I guess. I don't know. I'm definitely not trying to bill myself. I'm getting nervous as I'm saying this because I realize it makes me sound like I'm some kind of connoisseur of Sudanese culture, and I'm not. I have had exposure to it more than, I'd say more than the average person, maybe. I don't know. This is all getting very technical, and I don't want to use this as a challenge. I don't want anyone to start coming up to me and asking me about Sudanese cultural facts that I have no idea about. But okay, I realize that I'm rambling now, so let me get back on track. What I am trying to say is I come from Oman. It has a very large and active Sudanese community, and I just had a lot of exposure to a different side of this country and its people. It's very well known for its musical tradition. It's known as being one of the legal hubs or the jurisprudential hubs of the Arab world. It's known for producing some of the most notable literary personalities, such as Tayyib Saleh, Jamal Mahjoub, Layla Abu Layla, and the poet Jili Abdel Rahman, to name a very small few. More recently, I've become exposed to Sudanese food thanks to a local Sudanese street food business called Dakwa, which I feel like I swear They need to start hiring me as their marketing person. I plug them on any platform I get the chance. But no, seriously, these guys are so good. They serve variations of a Sudanese delicacy called agache, which is basically meat marinated in the most flavorful, spiciest peanut butter based marinade. Now, just as an aside, the word peanut butter in Arabic is ful Sudani, which literally translates to English into Sudanese bean. And I didn't know until a few years ago that peanuts do in fact feature prominently in Sudanese cuisine. And I never made the link between the name and the country. It's so crazy. Anyways, I'm going back onto talking about food again. This is the second time in a row that I'm talking about food, but I can't help it. In my mind, food, music, and literature are just the foundation of any culture. And I can't seem to talk about one without at least an honorable mention of the other. Sorry. My bad. I'm hungry now. Again. So these are my thoughts on Telepathy by Dr. Amir Tag Elsir. Please write to me and let me know about your favorite Sudanese authors. And if you happen to have read anything by Amir Tag Elsir, let me know what you think. And if you also happen to know of any more peanut-based Sudanese recipes, please consider this an official legal notice to hand over the recipe as soon as possible and no one gets hurt. A great big thanks to Dr. Amir Tag Elsir for generously taking the time out of his incredibly busy physician-writer schedule in Doha to answer my questions. And thank you also to Marilyn Muqbel for creating the original artwork for this episode. I hope you're enjoying listening to these as much as I'm enjoying making them. If you are, please consider leaving a little rating and review. It would help the paper cut massively in achieving its goal of reaching all the curious book lovers out there and get them to join into this growing community. Until next time, happy reading.